uh, almost. I think it may start to rain and maybe we get some thunder and lighting during this interview, but
Nah, it's fine. Reminds me home. Today I'm talking to my friend Matti Sulanto. He is from Finland and he is a photographer. He got interested in photography in the 70s and wanted to do commercial photography. His first assignment was in 1983 and he has been a professional photographer ever since. He's done many assignments for advertising, corporate portraits, and editorial works, and his real love is documentary and photojournalism. He doesn't take assignments anymore, but he concentrates his time between his personal projects and his successful YouTube channel. So let's hear from Matti his experience with film photography, his thoughts about photography in general, and how he sees the future of photography. Let's hear from him. All right, thanks for being here to be talking to me from Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. So, Matti, how did you started in photography? How was back on those days?
Some people remember exactly when they got their first camera and the exact date when they started photography. I don't have such clear memories, but I remember that some guys at school, some schoolmates were experimenting with film and developing their own film, and I think I got it from there, and I started experimenting myself, and that's how it started sometime in the 1970s when I was a teenager. And of course, the film was back then the only option that we had, and pretty much black and white film was also the way to go if you wanted to do any darkroom work or film development yourself. Color was out of the question because it was just too difficult, too challenging. So that's how I remember it started.
But this difficult, this hard that you're mentioning about the color film, was it hard to get the stocks? Was it hard to get developed? Was hard to pay for it, or it was all of them?
I guess it was just the developing part. It was easy to get film, of course, and easy to have it commercially developed or processed. That was not a problem. But if I wanted to do my own processing or developing, and I wanted to explore that, then it was pretty much black and white, at least for a beginner. Of course, already back then, I think you could buy suitable chemicals for developing, say, C41 at home, but it was not very common, and it would require too much for a beginner, because as you know, the temperature control and everything, it's so much more precise. And of course, if you want to do a good work with black and white, you gotta be precise too, but black and white has a lot more latitude, and because you can't, for example, screw up the color balance of the colors, only if you develop too much or too little you get bad negatives, but still you can't spoil the colors because there are no colors.
It feels that black and white, you always have like the forgiveness of both the film itself and the development process, that maybe if you are one degree up, 1 degree down, let's say you are like 10-20 seconds over developing or under developing, it's not, probably you're not gonna get like let's say the optimum result expecting, but it's not going to ruin your development or your negative.
Exactly. Yes, you will. Of course, every time if you are very consistent and you do it precisely, you'll get better results. But it's really hard to totally ruin your black and white development if you follow the instructions at least a little bit.
And generally, how was shooting film at that time?
Yeah, I've been planning to do a video on that topic because I think in a way film was so simple, as you already also mentioned it in one of your videos, that film is so simple. I mean, it of course it was also a little bit complicated, but once you load the film, you have your shutter speed and aperture, and that's it. Everything, it's all there. No, cameras were so simple. You didn't have any menu systems or any complicated settings in your camera. And also, if you wanted better image quality, you just loaded another roll of film, maybe instead of 400 ISO, you loaded 100 to get a little bit better image quality or something. It was so simple. You didn't have to change your camera system to another to get better image quality and so on. So I think film was really, really simple. And of course, back then there was no internet. And because of that, there was so little hate and all kinds of complex, convoluted conversation going on, flying around that would only confuse you. And yes, but of course, it was also complicated to shoot film compared to these days because you didn't get that instant reward. You had to shoot the whole roll and then process it or develop and see the negatives, and even from the negatives you got to be pretty like well trained to judge your results on the negatives. You had to print them to see what you got, really.
The contact prints. And
yeah, at least contact print to see the like the positive picture to be able to tell what you actually got. But still, sometimes I don't think I'm gonna go like 100% back to film ever again. But sometimes I just think that things were really, really simple back then. I think also you learned maybe quicker with film in a sense that you had to learn, otherwise your results were constantly like just bad.
No, that's a very good point. Of course, that when I started, shooting photography and stuff like that, was still film back then. Well, I'm kind of that old too. But the feeling and what you mentioned, is actually true. You had to have a certain level of knowledge of how to operate the camera and what you were doing with the camera to actually trust that you are getting some, that you could expect some results out of it.
Exactly. And somehow you had to learn pretty quickly, because if you ruined one roll of film, you didn't want to ruin another roll of film. So you kind of had to learn something. Of course, with modern cameras, you can't ruin anything. You gotta try really super hard to ruin a phone camera picture, for example. You can't, because that they are so good that no matter what you do, you'll get a decent picture.
Of course, that, like me, in your case, you as a professional photographer, that you are doing your work by then. How it was the transition, or the time of transition between the film and the digital for you as a photographer?
My transition was a kind of a soft, I would say, because before I even got my first like a professional digital camera, I already scanned my pictures and I used Photoshop to process my pictures even before that. So when I got my digital camera, it was pretty easy to adapt. But there are some things that were really strange during the transition period. For example, the pre-press houses that used to scan your film and prepare it for print, they were a little confused, and I guess the workflow was not very clear back then, because back in the film days, the pre-press house, when they scanned, say, a color positive film, they used the actual piece of film as a reference for the scan. So when they scanned the negative, they would put the piece of film on a light table and check that the scan looked like the original. But when digital came, there was no original anymore. There was only the digital file, and it was a little bit confusing time. And also, I did a lot of color separations at the time because the print houses or the pre-press houses felt that it was my job to do the color separations, and which means that I'm converting my RGB picture to
CMYK.
yes, but that changed after some years, but it was a little bit confusing because I was actually doing their job for a while. For amateur photographers, I don't think there was any confusion, but for us professionals who did a lot of print work for magazines and books and whatever, it was a little bit confusing because pre-press house didn't actually know what was their job, and I didn't actually know what was considered as my job. But I guess when few years went by and sort of digital cameras became more popular, then sort of the workflow became all clear again. But I remember the transition period, early 2000, late 90s, early 2000, it was slightly confusing for a commercial photographer.
And how did the market behave on that time? I mean, like the press, the pre-print houses, and that you explain a bit, the magazines. How did they behave in terms of which technology to adapt at that point in time? Because you were saying that it was a bit confusing for you as a photographer. I'm guessing that might have been quite confusing for them as well.
Yes, of course. In the early days when digital cameras only had like 3 megapixels, there was a lot of like hesitation if it's good enough or not. But I guess because cameras progressed and developed so quickly in early 2000, I think it pretty quickly kind of leveled out, and digital was widely accepted. But I'd say during the millennium, late 90s, early 2000, there were still magazines or print houses who would only accept film because they thought, digital is not good enough. But that didn't last very long. Only some years, maybe 2-3 years, and then when we got cameras like the Canon 5D, for example, and even before that, it was clear that digital would take over, and it was good enough.
One thing that you just said took a bit of my attention. You said that even before the digital, you were already doing the scanning of the of the negatives and using the Photoshop and whatever it was available in terms of software and edition tools, digital edition tools. I'm kind of curious to know how was like the scanning process back then, because nowadays, for the people that are still shooting film, it seems that the hardest part of the film process for us is like the scanning. It seems that the scanning has always been the most complicated part of the deal.
Back in the day, sometimes if I was, for example, working for a magazine, they would have either their own scanner and a scanner driver or person who was using the scanner, or they would have a contract with a pre-press house, and they would scan my pictures for me so I could then post-process them.
But at that time, was it more 35 millimeters medium format? How was that as well?
I used a lot of medium format, 6x7, especially for magazine work, because it simply looked so much better. Back in the day, even though you can make very good prints out of 35 millimeter, but let's say it was a magazine cover, for example, or a double spread, then the magazine or the client would really prefer a medium format original. And there was also one other thing. When you bring the original to the client, it looks so much better when you have like a big 6x7 positive color chrome to put on the light table. Everyone can see, even with bare eyes, if it's good or not. But a 35 millimeter looks so tiny, and you need a loupe to examine it, and also starts to suffer a little bit, especially if you have a double spread on a high quality magazine. It doesn't look high quality anymore, to be honest, unless you are looking for that certain look. But if you just want a really good looking picture, you needed a medium format back in the day. That's the way it was.
And going a little back to the transition point, of course that nowadays we all using digital one way or another. All right, even we film shooters.
Even you.
I am, of course. One way or another, we all using on our mobile phones, on cameras. Some people even for scanning negatives are using
Yes.
digital cameras for doing that. Looking at the evolution of the technology, how much did this evolution actually change photography as a craft?
When I look at my old pictures, I think I shoot the same pictures over and over again, even today, even with my digital camera. So I'm not sure if that's good or bad. Of course, not exactly the same pictures, but my shooting style is more or less the same. Whatever I shoot, maybe I don't always shoot the same subject or something, but my basic photography is still the same as it was 30 or 40 years ago. I'm more experienced now, of course, and technically better, but I don't think moving from film to digital, it has changed my photography that much, the way I shoot. I mean, of course, everything digital, in a way, it's so easy these days, because I can just aim my camera and hit the shutter, and I get perfect results every time. And sometimes I even think it's a little bit like too easy. And I'm not saying that photography should be difficult, but I just think that anything, when it becomes too easy, then it's not interesting anymore. That's part of the enjoyment and the challenge, that I have to think a little bit what I'm doing, and then I feel that satisfaction when I succeed.
About that same conversation, I always had the feeling when I'm shooting film that, and that's one of the downsides of digital photography in a way, is the fact that you don't have a physical evidence of your failure. You know what I mean? I store my negatives in here, and my negatives, they are all filed here with the good and the bad pictures that I have taken. And I think that in a way, when you are applying yourself to learn the craft, it's actually nice to have the failure in your hand, that you can actually go and you take that picture, you scan it, and you can, what did I do wrong here? What happened that I screwed up? While in a way on the digital, because of the nature of the file and the nature of the medium itself, you just go there, it was wrong, delete. And when you press the delete button and you kind of erase that failure for good, I don't think that you have actually the learning process of it, the kind of the thoughtful process that you say, where did I do wrong?
Yes, I think you're right. And when you have the contact sheet, it doesn't lie. There you have your like good frames and bad frames right next to each other, and you can't change that. Today we too easily we just delete the bad pictures, and maybe it would be a good idea to save some of those as a reminder, and maybe like a learning process, like you said.
But yeah, so we were just talking now before we cut in, about like the how, if the equipment has actually changed the craft of photography itself. And my question now, it's is the equipment important in the after all?
Well, of course, I think if you are only interested in photography and you're only interested in making a good picture, all you need is a camera, any camera, and you can do that. But of course, if you want to do a specific photograph, then you may need a specific gear to succeed. And especially if you are doing commercial work, you are not taking pictures for yourself, you are taking them for your client, and the client may want something that requires a special piece of gear, a lens, for example. But I still think that today we are paying way too much attention to our gear, and we talk too much about that instead of using that energy for creating photographs. I was just the other day, I borrowed an old Canon 5D from a friend of mine. It's a digital camera, but it's it's an old digital camera, and I'm having a good fun with that camera. And by modern standards, it's quite a basic camera. The autofocus is quite rudimentary and all that, but I'm still having fun, and I can make good pictures with that camera too. And it is 18 years old camera or something. It came out in 2005. One example, and of course, if you have a film camera, you can do the same thing. It doesn't matter what camera you have, as long as you are willing to sort of accept the camera as it is, and you are interested in photography and not cameras and lenses.
For some reason, a while ago, that was an experience that I had actually with film cameras, and then later with digital, and kind of the opposite experience. Back maybe about 10 years ago, I bought myself a Nikon F100. Okay, Great camera, modern film camera with all the autofocus, with all the gadgets that was paved into, that came to the digital cameras as the aids and everything. And I think I had that camera for a couple of years, and I decided to sell it. And the reason for me to sell that camera was that for some reason, the experience that I had using that camera was too close to the experience that I had using a digital camera. And I was actually looking for something a lot simpler. I was having to worry about focusing modes, metering modes, and I was seeking for the simplicity that we were talking earlier. Worry about shutter speed and lens aperture. That's it. So I sold the camera for that reason. Then years after, I bought the only digital camera that I actually bought brand new, which was a Fuji X Pro 2. It was the only brand new digital camera that I have ever bought. And I love that camera. I miss it. I had to sell it for professional reasons, and I miss it because the user experience that I have with that camera was something that for some reason that I cannot explain was inspiring me to take that camera with me to go buy milk on the shop and come back. So the user experience that I had with that camera was so pleasant and so good that it became like an extension of myself. So in a way, when it gets like to this conversation about the equipment, of course, like you mentioned, if you're doing a professional thing, it's a totally different story. You have a reason, and you have clients most likely telling that you have to use certain equipment, or that even yourself, you have to, that you're gonna have to have that specific equipment for that. But for the general public, like you mentioned on your video about the DP review and everything, I couldn't agree more. I think that we are, spending too much time arguing if a Sigma art 50 millimeters, 1 point whatever is better than a Sony equivalent of it, and in the end of the day, when we actually take the pictures and show to normal people, they can find a bloody difference.
And they don't care. And I think, of course, we all have a favorite camera, like you said, you talked about the Fuji. And it's important that my camera, I feel like you felt with the Fuji. I have to feel that I like my camera and I like to use it, especially if I'm a recreational photographer. Why would I do recreational photography if I didn't enjoy it? So it's important that I enjoy my camera too, but it's not to say that I should argue with you which camera is the best or which lens is the best. I just, like I said it in some of my other videos, that the gear matters maybe for the photographer in a sense that I have to be able to trust it and I have to be able to enjoy it. Yeah, we already covered the professional or commercial reasons. Let's not go into that anymore. But I have to just, if I feel that I need this camera or some other camera for my photography, then it's my business and no one else's. It's not, I'm not taking my pictures, or I don't want my audience to look at my picture and start thinking, oh, I wonder which camera he used, because then I have failed. If my picture doesn't offer anything more than that, then it's a failure.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. But like you're saying, for me, the only thing that justify the equipment bug, let's put this way, for me is the user experience. It's that point where when you are not a professional, once again, just going back, because if you are a professional, you're gonna search for the adequate and capable equipment to deliver that job, period. All right. If that is going to be your iPhone, or if that's going to be the latest Hasselblad or the latest Phase One, whatever, you're gonna have that to accomplish your task. I can accept someone saying that, okay, so I paid, I don't know how many €1,000 for a Leica. And I'm like, are you crazy? If that person turns to me and say that, no, I did that because that camera, that equipment inspires me. Okay. Conversation done. Conversation done. Okay. But I don't see much benefit on this, like you say yourself in quite a few of your videos, this pixel peeping that makes absolutely no sense. It's just, that, oh, mine is better and bigger, and okay, but it's better and bigger. Doesn't really matter if you have, that's an analogy that I use a lot because of my musical background. Say, man, you can go and buy Eric Clapton's guitar. You're not gonna play like him.
Probably not.
And I really like in your video about the deeper preview as well, that it's when you actually bring the conversation back to what really matters, at least in my opinion, about spending less time worrying about reviews of equipment and worrying a bit more about, okay, is my composition good? It's like, or even something even more trivial than that sometimes I feel that is very overlooked, is that, is it my editing skills good? Am I editing a picture to a certain degree that is enhancing the picture, or am I ruining a good picture?
Yes.
And I love that point that you brought.
I can't repeat it enough. I mean, we should concentrate on more on photography, but I guess it's because I think it's easier to sort of understand numbers and cameras in a sense that it's also easier to talk about them, because I'm not saying that I'm anything like special, that I know about photography more than someone else, but I'm just saying that there are a lot of people who really don't understand photography at all, and that's why they talk about cameras, because they don't understand photography, and they the only thing that matters is a sharp picture or something, and that's what they understand. If they see a sharp picture, then it's a good picture, and that's as far as their like understanding goes.
Oh.
Yeah, it's raining and there's a thunderstorm outside.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I'm not saying that I'm some sort of a genius who knows everything about photography and the content of a photograph. But I'm just saying that there are a lot of people out there who don't know at least what I know. That little bit that I know, they don't know.
Yeah, and I think that in a way, the sad part of this uh, gear fever that a lot of people seem to have is that I see a lot of youngsters that are getting interested in photography, or even old people that are picking a new hobby or something like that, with kind of limited knowledge of photography in general, that they start to think that, okay, if I don't have this camera, or if I don't have this lens, if I don't have this X amount of megapixels, I'm not gonna be good enough. And that's the sad part from my point of view, because I really think that the equipment is a secondary matter. Is a matter where, okay, so what do I need to make my vision better? But it's not the essential thing to make a vision happen.
Yes, and I also think that the threshold to publish or show your work is very low in photography. If we had the same threshold with, say, drawing, we would see a lot of these stick human beings, or how do you call these?
Yeah.
These stick characters with a, just
Right.
like 5-year-olds or 2-year-olds when they draw a human being. We would see a lot of that kind of drawings if the threshold was as low in, say, drawing or some other form of art. But people publish, or they proudly share a lot of pictures that are they are not worth enough. They are just like examples of someone practicing or trying, just learning the very, very basics, but they still think that it's something amazing because there's a sunset or something. But of course, that's not enough. And I'm not saying, of course, that you should never show your pictures to anyone. It's not that. But I just I think we are very, very.
I feel exactly the same way as you. But now, just as a matter of provocation and keep the conversation going, isn't that to blame on social media in general? Because very often in forums, in Facebook or Instagram or whatever, someone posts a bad picture, and you can clearly see that threshold, it's pretty low, and that's just going through. And then you go there and you say, listen, this picture is not good. But on the same time, you have a bunch of people that probably on the same level as them, saying that, oh no, this is amazing, this is great, this is, and all of that. And suddenly when you come with a piece of criticism saying that, right, no, this is not a good picture. So explain to me, why do you think that this is a good picture? Are you presenting this picture as someone that is on the learning process of getting better? Or are you like a lot of the people that think, no, this is what I do, this is my art?
Yes, I guess so. It's those forums, they are not a good place to receive any kind of feedback. And another problem is that people simply cannot accept any kind of criticism. And of course, when you see written words, you can interpret
whatever you want.
The way. Yes, and even if I say that your picture kind of, maybe it's not, it needs a little bit of your, or somehow your photography needs to develop a little bit or something. I say it like this, but if when you see it written, you may hear it like your photography needs something, and when it's criticism, you tend to take it the worst possible way, even if the person who wrote it wanted to be as kind as possible.
True.
So it's always good to have face-to-face feedback, so you can it's interactive, and you can feel what the other person is meaning better than just see a few words on a forum. And it's not good.
Matti, last question, and then you're free to go. How do you see the future of photography?
I think photography already it has changed so much since I started my photography some 40 years ago or so, and partly I like it, but then partly I don't like it. I think that when we are moving more and more towards processed pictures, like we already see many smartphone cameras, they heavily process your pictures, and sometimes the content or the what is in the picture, it's not even true anymore. Photography has one unique a feature, or how would you call it? Because photography can freeze a moment in time like no other media, and it is a document of that particular moment in time. Okay, yeah, the photographer chose to frame it certain way and all that, but it's still a document of that particular moment in time. And no other media can do that the way photography can. And it's a shame not to embrace that. That's what I think.
Right. So, Matti, thank you very much for your patience, and thanks a lot for coming and talking.
It was a pleasure
To me here, and thanks for all the help with that you've been giving to me for the channel and everything. And
questionable.
No, it's been extremely helpful, extremely helpful. So don't sell yourself short. And yeah, I hope you stay safe there in Malaysia. Don't walk around on the thunderstorm with the umbrella. Be careful. And I'm looking forward to see you here in Helsinki when you come back.
Sure thing. We'll see in the summer and maybe take some pictures together. Thanks. It was
Hopefully.
a pleasure.
Thanks. See you, mate. Take care.
See you.